Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Hello, sir.
Hey,
Hey, good to see you.
good to see you. It's been actually a while since we recorded at the time we're supposed to record.
Yeah, I was in Sydney for the last 10 days visiting my sister, and my parents also joined. It was great.
How are they?
Yeah. It was my first time ever in Sydney, and it was a lot of fun. My sister loves it. My parents love it. It's a great place. You ever been?
Never been to Australia at all?
Yeah, same. Same before this. But yeah, all's been good by you?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I saw a mouse in my house, so I've been chasing down the mouse.
Oh, wow.
Yep, it was a little baby mouse.
What are you gonna do when you find it?
Throw it out, put it in the park.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, sorry I missed the event you threw. It sounded fun. Looked fun.
Ah, yeah. Well, there were a couple. There are a couple events. There's another tonight.
Yeah, yeah. How late are you guys gonna go, do you think?
I don't know. Actually, not probably not that late.
Because I have a dinner with a friend at 7:30 or so, and so I'm hoping I can come after, but I'll check in with you guys to see if you're still going.
Yeah,
Cool.
or go to dinner earlier. I mean, like 7:30 is a little late to go to dinner. I think people should go to dinner at like 6:30.
Yeah, I'm trying to get.
I'm an early dinner kind of theorist.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think Brian Johnson and Huberman are too. Like I think that's the healthy thing. So I'll try to guilt my friend with the appropriate health advice.
Got it.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, you had some good posts since the last time we chatted. There's some relevant questions as it relates to them. Shall we get into it?
Absolutely.
Cool. So first, I think you have a pretty interesting theory or observation about Doge, that it's not just this sort of budget and accounting and sort of government effectiveness or efficiency sort of implement sort of mechanism or intervention, but that it's also a potentially ideological one as well. Do you want to share high level your reactions and reflections from sort of the first couple weeks of Doge?
Right. So if you're, there's this general acceptance that Doge is about what Elon says it is about, which is about cutting government waste and, shrinking the bureaucracy, things like that. Basically kind of zombie Reaganism, or like, you know, Reagan actually failed to really shrink the civil service. It's like, okay, we're gonna take Reagan seriously. The most dangerous words in English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Grover Norquist, we're gonna take him seriously. We're gonna shrink the government till we can drown it in a bathtub. Okay, government bad, private enterprise good, yay. And so I think that's what they're saying, and that's what credulous people like people in the media are basically taking that at face value. And they're thinking, why are they doing this? But I doubt that. The first reason I doubt that is because reducing the power of the civil service, actually, like permanently, just crushing the civil service, makes Trump into a powerless figurehead. So the less power, when Trump issues an executive order, all that is, an executive order is just a directive to the civil service to do things. It says, hey, civil servants, go do this. And so, I mean, you can have an executive order saying, don't do this, sit on your hands, don't do that. And some are, but most are just saying, like, go do this thing. And then if you don't have civil servants, right, if you don't have people working for the government, how do you do those things? And so shrinking the executive branch shrinks executive power. And I don't really think that Trump wants to shrink his own executive power, weaken himself as a leader of the country, right? Because without a civil service, issuing executive orders is just like, Michael Scott yelling, I declare bankruptcy. It's like nothing happens. And so that's one reason. Another reason is because I think that the amount of austerity that can really be achieved, through these methods, cutting waste and fraud, they realize it's very small. And it's small, and they know it's small. And we've always known it's small. So you can just go on Twitter and you can say, like, oh, I found USAID was giving money to, like, trans people in Africa or whatever. You can say that's fraud, but it's not fraud. It may be stupid, it may be pointless, or it may be pointful and useful. By the way, the purpose of a lot of those, gender programs in Africa is to reduce fertility rates in Africa so we don't get swamped with asylum seekers and would-be migrants. But these guys have not thought of that yet. Bill Gates has thought of that, but these guys are behind the curve on that. So they're just like, oh yeah, you're just promoting trans ideology. Anyway, they're so this is why I doubt that it's really about sort of, let's go back and do the Reagan Revolution right this time. I think it's not really about that. I mean, obviously they'll be happy if they find ways to get rid of and, cut some stuff they don't like. And Elon probably has the idea that the civil servants could be more efficient. Like, I don't think he's lying about any of this, right? I think that's not nothing of a motivation. It's just not the big motivation. I think the big motivation is ideological. I think if you look at the kind of programs they're attacking, the kind of people they're trying to let go from the civil service, it's all about wokeness, DEI. It's all ideological. Woke progressive ideology is what they're going after. The very first thing they did was suspend the DEI employees. That's the very first thing Trump did with the civil service. All DEI people, you're gone. Bye. And then, or they just removed those positions. Those positions no longer exist. And when you look at all the programs that Elon is saying are wasteful or fraudulent, it's primarily stuff that is associated with like woke ideology, like promoting trans stuff in Africa or whatever. So you can see by their actions what they're really going after. And so when you look at what Elon has talked about, Elon's enthusiasm for small government and fiscal austerity is very recent. Whereas his anger at what he calls the woke mind virus has been there for years and years. And, was probably in large part behind his purchase of Twitter and is behind a lot of other stuff that he does. So basically, I think he sees himself as conducting an ideological purge. And I think the Trump people are absolutely happy to go along with that. So, if this were really about shrinking the size of government, here you have a private sector guy coming in and shrinking Trump's power. Like, would Trump like that? No, it would cause conflict between Elon and Trump. But there's no conflict happening with Doge. Trump has no problem with Doge at all. And I think it's because everyone understands that this is an ideological purge. And anyway, that's my theory. This is about ideology.
So a few follow-ups on that. So first is just I haven't looked into this deeply. I'm curious if but sometimes I hear claims like there's like billions of dollars in, I don't know if fraud is the right word, or that gets lost. They just get lost in the system. Is that accurate? Or like what is sort of the level of?
Yes, there are billions of dollars that get lost in the system, but we're talking about a system that handles trillions of dollars.
Right. So we're basically saying, hey, it's a drop in the bucket, basically. Obviously billions.
Actual fraud is a small amount, right? Even if you find like fraud, there's stuff that's technically fraud at the Pentagon because it's classified stuff. Like if we're going to build super missile that can like take out all of China's bases and whoa, they didn't know we had that. We're not going to say, in our line item in the budget, we're not going to say super missile that can destroy China. We're going to say, healthcare.
Yeah, but I hear reports that like sometimes, or articles, it's like we sent 100 billion to Ukraine and then Ukraine is like, wait, where's the 100 billion? Like we only got this amount. Like, is that just like false?
Well, first of all, some of that, so there's two things going on there. The first thing is very boring. The first thing is that we commit a certain amount and then don't disburse it. And that happens with government programs all the time. We say we are notionally going to spend this amount of money, but then the amount of money doesn't actually get spent. And that happens all the time. But that's, that money didn't go anywhere. The checks never got written. We still have the money. That's money we still have. That's just us not spending stuff. And so, if Elon were really concerned about austerity, he would look at that and he would say, cool, we're spending less than we said we would. Because that's actually saving us money. So when we make commitments that are not appropriated, so people don't realize that we have, when they say Congress spends this certain amount, that can mean two different things. There's actually two steps to spending. The first is to reserve an amount of money in the budget, which is just called commitment. And the second, called appropriation, is when you actually decide, okay, this will be spent now. Actually, there's a third level, which is when the check actually gets written, but usually once you appropriate it, the check goes out pretty fast. So basically, when Congress says it's going to spend a certain amount of money, that money doesn't necessarily get spent. So for example, the CHIPS and Science Act had all this money for research spending. We're going to create all these innovation hubs throughout America. That money never got spent. It never happened. It never got appropriated. Congress never appropriated it. And that doesn't mean that the money went into someone's pocket somewhere, right? The money is a bank account. right? That's the Treasury has a bank account at the Fed, and that's where the money is. It just never got spent. Or sometimes the money's not even in the bank account. It's just like no spending ever happened. We didn't set aside any money. It's just like we said we're going to do it and then we didn't do it, right? And I think this is not popularly understood that this is how spending works. And so some of the money earmarked for Ukraine probably went to covert weapons programs, but that's probably not a lot. It's probably like if you have basically the Pentagon tries very hard to hide all its secret weapons programs. And one place to hide that would be in assistance to Ukraine. If you're going to give $100 billion to Ukraine, you want to spend $5 billion on a secret weapons program, well, just slip it in there. And so is that fraud? Yeah, that's fraud. Is that waste? No, it's not waste. We would like secret weapons programs that allow us to destroy our enemies. And I hope that if Elon is being advised by people from Palantir, the Palantir people will take him aside and explain this to him. And I'm sure he knows this.
Yeah. Do you think that Doge will have a financial impact, or is it kind of like, pennies in front of a steamroller or something?
It's pennies. I think that it will not have a big financial impact, I predict. Now, other things that the Trump administration is doing might have a big financial impact, but I think that this will not. And one thing is that Republicans have been trying to do this for decades and decades. And you can say, oh, well, Elon's just much better than them, but he's not 100x better, okay, at this. It's not like you get, Luke to go through the payment systems and suddenly he's just much better at whoever the GAO had doing this. And Republican, staffers were trying to do this in like the 2000s, and they didn't really find a lot. So I love Luke Ferritor, but I don't think he's going to be able to find 100x the waste that Rick Perry and Paul Ryan's people found back in the day. And so I do think it's not gonna add up to a big budget impact. So we can talk about like fiscal stuff. What could we really do to bring the deficit down? That's an important thing, and I'm going to write about that soon because the debt is becoming a real problem very quickly.
Well, what's the TLDR there, or what are the biggest levers?
Interest costs.
Interest costs.
So the United States has a big stock of debt. We have all these outstanding bonds, and as they mature, we've got to roll them over. We've got to re-borrow the money, right? And since interest rates are higher now, which we raised them to fight inflation, since interest rates are higher, when we roll over the money, when we roll over the treasury bonds, we have to roll them over at a higher interest rate when they mature. And so we had borrowed at 0% during like the era of super low interest rates, ZIRP, and now we've got to reborrow at 4%, something like that. And so like that's a huge increase in interest costs. But now since our stock of debt is so high, because we built up this giant stock of debt for COVID, for the Great Recession, for Bush's tax cuts, et cetera, it's much higher than it was in the 90s, right? That our stock of debt as a function of GDP. So when interest rates go up, even if they don't go up all the way to the place they were in the 80s, if interest rates go up to just like 4% or whatever, like that's going to be as we roll it over, it's going to create huge interest costs. And this has already happened. So interest costs as a percentage of GDP have now risen back to where they were at their highest level ever in our history, which was in the 90s. And they're going higher because there's a lot of zero interest debt left to still roll over. And when that gets rolled over, the interest costs are going to go up and up, and they're just going to crowd out so many things. It's going to paralyze our budget. It's going to paralyze our country. And so, and then the impulse, the temptation will be to lower interest rates, intentionally lower interest rates, so that you reduce the cost of financing that debt. That is something called fiscal dominance. It means that fiscal concerns are dominating the policymaking process. But if you do that, what do you get? Like if you lower interest rates too much, what happens, right? Econ 102 quiz. What happens if you lower interest rates too much?
Venture capitalists are happy. I'm just kidding.
That's true.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Ever feel like managing your business finances is a full-time job on top of your actual full-time job? Yeah, me too. That is until I started using Found. Found is a business banking platform that lets you effortlessly track expenses, manage invoices, and prepare for taxes. You can even set aside money for different business goals and control spending with different virtual cards. I've saved so much money because Found helps me identify tax write-offs. And I saved so much time that I can now devote to chasing new opportunities and doing the work I enjoy. Oh, and by the way, other small businesses are loving Found too. This Found user said, "Found is going to save me so much headache. It makes everything so much easier. Expenses, income, profits, taxes, invoices even. And Found has 30,000 5-star reviews just like this." Open a Found account for free at found.com/econ102. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Piermont Bank, member FDIC. Don't put this one off. Join thousands of business owners who have streamlined their finances with Found. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102.
What happens if you lower interest rates too much? Do we have inflation?
Yeah, exactly. And so we get inflation because higher interest rates make inflation go down, lower interest rates make inflation go up, typically. And so that's a big danger because, now add that to like tariffs, tariff uncertainty even, or just whatever other cost pressures there are, decoupling from China, I don't know, stuff like that. And then you have a recipe for resurgent inflation, which will make stocks go down. People will be sad. Trump will be very unpopular. People will be like, why do my eggs cost so much? Why does all my stuff cost so much? Why does my rent cost so much? Why does my medical care cost so much? And, because lower interest rates will do that. If you just force interest rates lower so that you can carry the cost of your federal debt. So the alternative is austerity. The alternative is simply to, raise taxes and cut spending, right? And so Congress has to do that. Doge can find a little bit, but Doge isn't going to materially affect this. Like, you're going to have to raise taxes, cut spending. That's what you need to do. And so Trump's planning a bunch of tax cuts. We can't do that. That's going to screw us. That's going to be highly inflationary. And Elon knows this. And so I hope that Shadow President Elon can convince Trump to not do tax cuts, because, the amount they goose our economy is like tiny. They don't pay for themselves. They goose our economy a tiny bit. Like, I can show you the numbers, but it's small because our taxes are already pretty low. And so, extra tax cuts don't really do that much more. And so we need to raise taxes, and we're going to need to raise taxes on the middle class. The average American is going to have to pay for the legacy of COVID relief, of Great Recession stimulus, and of these giant spending parties that we did. But we also have to cut spending.
So, okay, that's the alternative, but isn't that bad meaning, won't that be unpopular too? Or is inflation more unpopular than taxes?
We'll find out, I guess, because it's one or the other. And, this is like there's a theory in economics called the fiscal theory of the price level, that if you see Elon saying like deficits cause inflation, blah, 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 that's the fiscal theory of the price level. That's, you talk to John Cochrane of the Hoover Institute, he'll tell you this. And so the fiscal theory of the price level basically says either you pay for your spending now, or you pay for it later through inflation. Or you pay for it later, or you pay for it now, or you pay for it through taxes, you pay for it later through austerity, or you pay for it through inflation. There's no third option. There's no option where you just don't pay for it, right? You can default on your debt, but then you pay for it in other ways by higher borrowing costs down the road and things like that. So the United States can default. And when Trump said that he had found irregularity in treasuries so that some of these treasuries we don't really need to pay, he's talking about a partial default. Trump has defaults on his own debts many times. It's called declaring bankruptcy. He's declared bankruptcy many times, and that's a debt default. And so I forget how many times Trump has declared bankruptcy, but I think it's more than one. Let's look that up. How many times has Trump declared bankruptcy? 6 times. So Trump has declared bankrupt. Trump has defaulted on his own debt 6 times. He's very used to this. And he always has this instinct that America can do the same. Well, if America defaults on its debt, all hell breaks loose all over the world, but especially here. And so it's really that. So when you saw Trump talk about irregularities in the Treasury system, like, ooh, actually, we don't have to pay out all these bonds that we owe. You saw some disruptions in the Treasury market instantaneously, and the administration had to walk it back. But there's speculation that Trump is thinking about a partial default, which is a default. A partial default is a default. If you say I'm going to pay you back $10 and you pay back $9, you've defaulted on $1 of debt. And one of the bedrock assumptions underpinning all of our financial markets and economy is that the treasuries never default. They're a risk-free asset. So if you don't want to default, you've got to either inflate, which makes people mad, or you've got to do austerity, which may make people mad. So you can, or you default, which makes people really mad as well. So basically, if you borrow all that money and anything you do to take away that giant pile of debt will make people mad, then people are going to get mad. That is now assured to happen. And so, yeah, so I think there's really not a hell of a lot you can do at this point that's not going to make people mad. You just have to decide what's going to make people less mad. And I think that tax hikes on the middle class will make people mad, but inflation will probably make people madder. So they're going to cut spending. So what they're going to do, what the Republicans are going to try to do is kill Medicaid. Medicaid is our largest welfare program. It is a welfare program. And I tried to explain this. I think we're going to republish the interview I did with the How to Money podcast, personal finance podcast. But basically it's like this. Medicaid, the name sounds similar to Medicare, so we assume it's something similar, but it's actually completely different. Medicare is a thing called social insurance, which means that imagine you just forced everyone in the country to buy into an insurance program and everyone pays their premiums, and then the people who get sick get money out and the people who don't get sick don't get money out. That's insurance, right? That's how insurance works. Now, take Medicare, everybody pays payroll taxes that pay into the Medicare system, and then if they need healthcare when they're old, if they need more healthcare, they take out more. If they need less healthcare, they take out less from the Medicare system. It is social insurance. Medicare is an insurance program. Social Security is not. Social Security is like a forced savings program. Medicare is a forced insurance program. We're just forcing the whole country to be part of one, old age health insurance scheme where the payroll taxes you pay are like the premiums, and the healthcare that you use from Medicare, the Medicare claims that you do when you're old, those are your payouts, right? Those are your claims on the insurance. So, but Medicaid is not like that. Medicaid is only for poor people. You and I will, God willing, will never use Medicaid. We'll never see a dime for Medicaid, but we'll pay money for Medicaid. It's redistribution. It's pure redistribution. It is not insurance. It's, obviously there's a tiny insurance aspect because poor people do pay a tiny bit of taxes and they use slightly different amounts of benefits, but it's pretty much redistribution. It is simply a welfare program by which we tax America and we use it to pay for poor people's healthcare. That's it. That's what Medicaid is. It is a welfare program, and it's our biggest welfare program. And it's the biggest one of a number of healthcare-oriented welfare programs in the federal budget. So let's look at federal budget pie chart. When you look at a federal budget pie chart, some of these pie charts are only discretionary spending, while others of these pie charts are other stuff. So usually they put Medicare and health, they don't break these out. But then a detailed pie chart of the federal budget will show like a breakdown of health stuff. And basically there's all these other health programs besides Medicaid that are redistribution. So one of those is veterans. Maybe you like redistributing money to veterans, but it's also money that you and I will never see because we're not veterans. Again, hopefully we don't have to become veterans. But yeah, so there's all these redistributionary programs. There's other healthcare programs for poor people besides Medicaid. Republicans are going to try to kill those. I think that the reason they haven't been, and they've wanted to kill Medicaid for a very long time. They are not unaware that it is a redistribution program, a welfare program that just calls itself brazenly, falsely calls itself an insurance program. They know this and they want to kill it. Here's the problem. Medicaid is a word that sounds like Medicare, and Medicare is an insurance program. And so whenever you tell people we're going to kill Medicaid, they're like, what? Medicare? You're going to kill my Medicare? Keep your government hands off my Medicare. So whoever named it Medicaid, that was like the ultimate coup of naming. Like that's better than like Black Lives Matter and the pro-life movement. Like that's an even better naming, coup. It's just like the words sound the same. So people think Medicaid is some sort of insurance program that they can get. It isn't. So Republicans are going to try to kill Medicaid. If people knew what Medicaid was, the constituency to kill it would be very large, because people would not want to pay. Americans don't like welfare very much. And they don't want to pay for poor people's health care, because they don't want to pay for anything for poor people, because the dominant impression in America is that poor people don't deserve to get, stuff that they didn't earn. Now, we can disagree with that, be bleeding heart liberals, etc. But that is, Americans do not like welfare. And honestly, Medicaid is probably not a great program, in that we should just replace it with cash benefits anyway, but that's another story, and no one's talking about that. So I guess the point is that they're going to try to kill Medicaid to save money. Now, Medicaid is it's hundreds of billions of dollars. So annual Medicaid spending, annual Medicaid budget, $804 billion in 2022. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's $1 trillion. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's almost $1 trillion. So total federal budget, the total federal budget is 6.75 trillion. So we're talking about, 0.8 over 6.75. We're talking about 12% of the federal budget is Medicaid. You kill that, and you can do one of two things. You can either reduce deficits, or you can dish out tax cuts to rich people. Unfortunately, Republicans like dishing out tax cuts to rich people, even if it increases the deficit and puts America in danger of inflation, default, or austerity further down the line. It is they love throwing a blowout party for the rich people today, damn the consequences tomorrow. And that's crappy.
Yeah. If you were leading our austerity game plan, besides tax increases or not having tax cuts, where do you think is, do you agree that, or do you also think that removing Medicaid is the right idea if you want to cut, 10% or 12% of our spending? Or do you think there are other lower hanging fruit?
No, I think that's all the healthcare stuff that our government spends money on, a lot of which isn't for poor people. It's for middle-class people of various stripes. A lot of that is stuff that I would cut for one simple reason. When you cut demand, demand stimulus for basically subsidies for specific industries, you'll force prices lower in those industries. Americans pay way too much for healthcare. We spend much higher percentage of our GDP on healthcare than other rich countries. Even than Switzerland, which is almost as rich as us, we spend a much higher percent, or Singapore, we spend a much higher percent of our wealth on healthcare. And so if we stop subsidizing healthcare so much, you've heard the phrase restrict supply, subsidize demand. People say this all the time. Some people call it cost disease socialism. The Niskanen Center calls it that. But then Mark Andreessen talks about this a lot. I don't know who else talks about this. So that's what we basically do with healthcare. If you reduce government payments to healthcare, you will restrain healthcare costs. Now, because that spending is redistributionary, it hurts the poor, right? You're removing healthcare for poor people. That's cruel. And I would like to see us sort of replace that with cash benefits. Give poor people money to spend on medical care or food or childcare, instead of forcing them to spend it all on medical care. I think that the medical industry in America has huge cost overruns and very little incentive for efficiency, because the money just kept flowing in, and a lot of that money was government subsidies. So a lot of the Obamacare subsidies that Biden did in the American Rescue Plan that ended up contributing to inflation, a lot of those healthcare subsidies were for the middle class. So, just get rid of them. Student debt cancellation, cancel that. Make everyone pay back all their student loans. That's hundreds of billions of dollars that you just got. Cancel Biden did a plan where, going forward, we say that if you don't make past a certain income, you don't actually have to pay back your student loans. Cancel that. Borrow the money, pay it back. You got a degree, pay it back. We could keep some, if you're poor and can't, pay back student loans, we could let you discharge in bankruptcy. Let people go bankrupt. If they can't pay back their loans, it's fine. Let them default on their debt, and then start over again. So kill student loan forgiveness, kill healthcare subsidies. I would prioritize killing healthcare subsidies for middle class people, right? Republicans will prioritize killing healthcare subsidies for the poor, which is more cruel. But either way, I think that shoveling money into the maw of healthcare and childcare, childcare subsidies do raise fertility a tiny bit, but I think child tax credits are just a much better way of doing that. Subsidies for service industries are what I would cut, and we do a lot of it. And then I would raise taxes. I would raise taxes, and I would cut healthcare and service subsidies. Cut there was this big idea that we were going to subsidize the care economy, that was the future of work in the age of AI, was humans taking care of other humans. That might be wrong. Like, it might be AI that does that. But that aside, that I think that there was this idea that that's where the jobs will be. And so that's what we need to subsidize. Basically, an industrial policy around the care economy. And this was Heather Boushey of the Washington Center for Equitable Growth really pushed this very hard. And you could see this throughout the Biden administration. You could see subsidies for care jobs. Kill them all. Get rid of them. Nope. None of that. So that's what I would cut if I were in charge.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays. The same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com.
You would cut those subsidies because they're just ineffective, basically, or that sort of.
I would cut those subsidies because if you're going to give people cash, so if you give people in-kind subsidy, you say, here's money you have to spend on healthcare, right? And if they don't adjust their spending elsewhere to compensate for that, if they actually go and dutifully do what you say and spend it on healthcare instead of anything else, which by and large they do, that's called a flypaper effect in economics. But so when you tell people spend these dollars, here's some dollars to spend on healthcare, go spend this on healthcare, they do that and they don't reduce their other spending on healthcare to then like go buy, like PlayStations or something. They don't do that. They actually just spend more on healthcare. And so when you do that, it pushes up the price of healthcare. When you subsidize childcare, it pushes up the price of childcare because supply is heavily restricted for a lot of these things. And because supply is restricted, when you restrict supply and you subsidize demand, you get price increases. So what happens is that this is a middle-class redistribution program to people in the healthcare industry. We are just shoveling money at inefficient paper processors who say like, yes, complete this intake. You do these intake forms with a doctor, right? You do 1 million times. Like, oh, let's take your blood pressure yet again. Like those are small inefficiencies, right, on their own, but they are indicative of much bigger inefficiencies within the healthcare system. There's a whole lot of ways we could make our healthcare system more efficient. We just don't do it. And one of the reasons is because the money keeps rolling in from these subsidies. Childcare, same thing. Childcare has just grown and grown as a percentage of the budget, but the amount of childcare provided has not grown by nearly as much as the cost of childcare, because there's some supply constraints within the system there. It's hard to get accredited, to set up a childcare facility. You've got to really jump through a lot of hoops if you want to take care of people's kids. And so because of that, we're just feeding subsidies to this monster. And so instead of people getting more childcare, America has this disease where we think if we write a check for something, then that's what gets done. But in fact, price impact is a thing. Sometimes if you write a check for stuff, you don't get more done. Just the price of the thing goes up and you get the same amount as before, but whoever's providing it just gets more dollars for their own pocket. And so, people who run hospitals, the providers are getting the money. The pharmaceutical companies are getting the money. Makers of imaging devices are getting the money. Some doctors, like when I got an MRI at UCSF, they billed my insurance $10,000. When I got an MRI at Simon Med Imaging, they billed my insurance $1,000. That's the same MRI. It's a brain MRI. I have some sort of pituitary cyst that I have to get periodically checked. So then, there's a 10x cost difference there. And one reason is because the radiologist that UCSF hands the thing to, that gives you the report within the day, is a better radiologist and will give you an expert opinion faster. But that's not worth a 10x cost difference, honestly. Like a radiologist Like the radiologist looks at it, takes 30 minutes of their time. 30 minutes of a radiologist's time is not worth $9,000. You know, that's if you're looking for waste, that's absolute waste. And so, and part of the reason they've been, you know, that goes into the pockets of execs of the hospital system, or salaries of regular workers, or just inefficiently hiring too many workers to do too much duplicated, useless work in the healthcare system. And so whether it's administrative or it's making you do those forms or taking your blood pressure again, whatever it is, whatever this work is, you know, there's a hell of a lot of waste in the system. And one reason we haven't purged the waste in the system is because the money keeps rolling in from government subsidies. And those revoking those subsidies will disproportionately hurt poor middle class people, because that's who gets subsidized. There is a redistributionary component, but there's a big component of inefficiency here, where all we're doing is pushing up prices. All we're doing is distorting the economy and pushing up the prices of these care industries without actually providing more care. So we need to cut those. And there's so many billions of dollars. Let's look at healthcare percent of total federal budget. Federal spending on domestic and global healthcare programs and services accounted for 29% of net federal outlays. That's net of the interest, I believe. Taking into account offsetting receipts, it's over a quarter of the budget, right? Actually, no, that may be even including interest on the debt. So it's just absolutely huge. And our healthcare costs have just grown uncontrollably. Now, fortunately, healthcare costs have stopped growing faster than GDP in a recent few years, which is good. That's good. We're generally seeing the end of the overpriced service boom. So college tuition is going down now. Childcare is still going up, but then it's less of a thing. And so college tuition is going down, and healthcare is like flat as a percent of GDP at a very high level. So we need to push that down. And so I would cut government healthcare programs. I know that makes me a bad liberal, but like, you've got to accept constraints in this world.
That makes you reasonable. Like, you got to cut something, right? What about Social Security?
And that's the thing we can cut that is the most efficient to cut, because part of those cuts will be offset by lower prices. And the amount of healthcare that people get will not go down that much, because when you're in a supply constrained situation, you know, you have your, like, here's your supply, it's constrained, it's just straight up and down, it's a set amount, right? And here's your demand, right? You reduce demand by paying less, you still get the same amount, but the price goes down. Now, in reality, this isn't quite up and down. There's a little bit of that. So you do actually get a little bit less, right? I'm doing supply demand graphs with my hands on a podcast. Anyway, that's what I got a PhD for. So then, we're living up to the Econ 102 moniker here, really. We're just,
yeah, exactly. What about Social Security? Is it worth touching that, or is that just infeasible?
So Social Security is a problem for the future, because we're running out of young people because of collapsed fertility. And if we exclude a bunch of immigrants, Social Security is going to be even more of a problem. So what we're going to have to do is cut benefits and raise the retirement age. There's nothing else to do. Well, okay, so we can also make it a little more redistributionary. We can raise the cap on Social Security taxes, which we should do. You know, rich people pay more. It's okay. It's fine. It's not that much. You're rich anyway. You're going to live a good life, and some old people will get to live.
Is Social Security means tested?
Social Security is, so payroll taxes are capped at a certain level of income. So if you make, like, you know, like Elon Musk level of money, you're not paying payroll taxes on most of that.
But is Elon Musk going to get Social Security benefits, or is it only for?
Sure.
Oh, wow.
Elon Musk will get Social Security benefits.
Should we make it so that rich people don't need to get Social Security benefits?
Well, that's an even more severe form of redistribution of the Social Security system. Just if you eliminate that cap on payroll tax, that'll do it.
Got it.
That'll make it redistributionary. And people have resisted that, because the whole idea of Social Security was that it's a pension system. You get out what you put in. And so the benefits are capped. So Elon Musk gets Social Security benefits up to that income level. So if you uncap the taxes but don't uncap the benefits, it becomes redistributionary. You're paying taxes on all your high income. You're only getting benefits corresponding to, like, this lower level of income.
Yeah.
So that's redistribution. That's what that is. That's called raising tax on rich people. Well, I'm a shit lib, right? I'm a lib. I want to raise taxes on the rich people so that middle class people can eat.
Right. Okay. So going back to Doge, there's this fantasy that people have, and, you know, it's not a perfect fantasy, of course, or perfect analogy, but people will say, hey, Elon took over Twitter, and with like 20% of the employees, you know, created the same product, more or less. Now, let's just take that as an analogy. Obviously, it's not perfect, but is there even on the just Twitter side, but is there a version of a government that is as effective with 20% or some significantly decreased cost?
Well, of course there is. So basically, if Elon really can go in there and just like, fire all the useless people and keep the useful people there, then that would be great for our country. But so it would be.
But you don't see it happening, basically, or you don't think it will happen?
Well, I think that number one, Doge is primarily an ideological project, right? So I think that limits the degree to which we will see actual government efficiency. It's really Department of Government anti-wokeness. That's what Doge really is. It's, and whether you think that's good or bad, I happen to think that, I was very irritated at the sort of spread of a lot of wokeness. I thought wokeness as a grassroots movement accomplished a few good things back in the 2010s. So I'm not like totally anti-woke, like I'm glad women are getting less sexually harassed on the job. Like I'm glad there's like Asian people on TV now, and I'm also glad that I think it was long overdue for white people in America to start acting like, like a minority group, because they're not a minority yet, but they're soon to be. And of course it depends on how many Hispanics identify as white. I know that. But essentially America isn't the idea that white people are just this invisible majority. That was not going to last. And so at some point, we needed to think about white people as a group. And I think wokeness allowed us to do that. Unfortunately, it did it in a kind of stupid way where wokeness was like, let's discriminate against white people. And that's good because of, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, that's dumb. And that's going to be rolled back. And I'm glad about that. I don't want my country to be a racially discriminatory country. I don't think white people ought to be racially discriminated against. That's wrong. That's against the principles of America. That's against the principles that I grew up with. And there was never a really good reason for that. And all the theoretical justifications of like America has been stamped from the beginning with white supremacy as inherently racist nation, blah, 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 is just wrong. Like that stuff's made up. I mean, of course, America was racist long in the past, but the idea that it has this racist DNA that needs to be expunged by having like anti-white discrimination at every level of government and society is wrong. It doesn't need that. And I'm glad to see that go. I'm very glad to see that go. But at the same time, I understand that an ideological project of getting rid of that stuff is not going to, it's not going to balance the budget, and it's not necessarily going to make the government more efficient. The other thing is that the objective of government isn't as clear. So when you have a company, when you come in and cut costs, like you have the consultants say, okay, what do you do? What's your job? Maybe we can eliminate you. You have McKinsey come in and cut your costs, right? Well, you become more profitable. Profits are bottom line. As a company, profits are bottom line. What's the bottom line of the government? I can't tell you. It doesn't even have one bottom line. It's like promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, blah, 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 blah. Like the government has a lot of different purposes. It doesn't have one bottom line. And what its purpose is a matter of opinion as well. So in other words, it's not as easy for Elon to simply, for Elon to see, even if Elon didn't even, cared about efficiency more than ideology, even if that's what he actually cared about the most, it would be very difficult to tell when you've become efficient, right? So like if I have a government program that, hands money to like community art things, is that inefficient or is that efficient? What do you think? Like government grant for community art programs, efficient or inefficient?
For probably inefficient. I'm just teasing. I mean,
Inefficient. Why?
yeah, right. You can't tie it back to profit in the same way that you can with a company, and so it's a bit harder there.
It sounds like something that like, community art program, it's probably going to suck. It's probably going to be sucky art, right? But then maybe you go out and you look at the community art program and it's a bunch of like, teenage girls doing like cute stuff, and they get to like hang out with each other, or maybe it keeps people off the streets. Maybe it actually is like provides some sort of like cheap daycare because you get around daycare laws by having people be at the after school program where they're not subject to all the regulations of daycare. And so, there's all these other things it could be. And then you go out there and you're like, well, actually, okay, let's keep this one. But the real point is not about community art. It's about whether it's about how you tell when the government's efficient. And it's really difficult to tell when the government is being efficient because you don't know what the point of it is. And do we agree that one guy, Elon Musk, gets to decide what the point of government is, like for every single program? Like, so I agree with the critics of Doge, who say that, Congress was democratically elected to decide what programs are worth it and what aren't. And obviously they're going to disagree with us, right? And so now it's not that simple, because sometimes Congress gives a broad authorization, basically creates a slush fund. And then that slush fund is the bureaucrats get to get wide discretion on what to spend it on. So maybe Congress is like, we authorize this much for community art programs, and then a bureaucrat decides, well, this is going to be like, like transfers for Palestine, kind of whatever, right? And so that's discretion, and you can say that this wasn't the original intent. And I think there's going to be lots of those arguments. And then but then in broad strokes, Congress says what's worth funding and what's not. And we elect Congress. And I know it's a cumbersome process, right? We're not, whether Congress funds a community art program or not is probably not going to make or break the career of any individual congressman. So democracy, we entrust a lot of this stuff to the judgment of the representatives we elect. We're a republic, not a democracy, right? I mean, of course we're a democracy. We're not a direct democracy. We're a republic, except California, which has these stupid ballot propositions which have ruined our state. And so, but yeah, so we are a republic, and that's what our democracy looks like. And if Elon gets to inject his personal opinion as to which programs are, or his appointed employees, even if those employees are our friends, if they get to decide unilaterally just which programs are worth it and which programs aren't, then what that means is that the executive branch has appropriated power from the legislative branch. That means that Congress's spending is only a recommendation.
In your opinion, what is the right framework for thinking about sort of where sort of legislative power should start to begin versus where the executive should start to begin?
Well, the courts are about to litigate this, and they have litigated it before. Basically, they say that the general idea is that there's a balance where Congress sort of gives a broad, like, spend this much money on this, and then the executive, like, basically slush funds that. And what's really going to happen is that we're going to slush fund it in a different way. Doge and Trump together are going to take control of the Office of Personnel Management. That office is the HR department for the government. They're going to start hiring conservatives. What we've seen is that although there's education polarization in America such that most of the educated people are liberals, progressives, it is possible to find enough conservatives to staff stuff if you just go really hard at that. So we've seen this with the Federalist Society and the judiciary. You know about that, right?
No, I don't know as much as I should.
Oh, so most lawyers are progressives, right? Like 80%, I don't know, something, depending on how you define it. Most lawyers are progressives. And yet the judiciary is fairly ideologically balanced and even has a majority on the Supreme Court. How did that happen? It happened because of something called the Federalist Society, which is a gang of conservative lawyers and judges and law professors and affiliated people who finds, identifies, promotes, and hires conservatives within the legal profession and the judiciary, and has managed to. So it's like a small but tough prison gang, right? You've got like a small prison gang, but because they're really tough, you don't mess with them. And that's what the Federalist Society has become in response to education polarization. And I think that the Federalist Society for everything is how conservatives can maintain institutional ideological balance in an age of education polarization. That was a mouthful. What that means is if conservatives discriminate in favor of conservatives and use, elected political power to do that, they can cancel out the natural tendency of these professions and institutions to be progressive. And so I think that they're going to do that with the civil service.
So I agree with you. I agree with your theory. I think Elon is ideologically motivated. A more charitable way of saying is he's more mission motivated more than, but a couple follow-ups to that. One is I don't see why he can't be both a goal of his to make sort of the government more conservative or less woke, but also to make it more efficient in kind of the same way Twitter is an ideological project for him too, right? But he also, made it more efficient as well, in addition to making it more conservative. So could he do the same thing for the government? And then two, and my sort of closing point is I see a bad world in which there's basically too much homogeneity on either side, either sort of institution that is too, Democrat or too Republican. But don't we want a bit of sort of political diversity in these institutions? And so is it possible that it will have a good outcome of diversifying some of these institutions so that you have, or do we actually fear the world where, as one-sided as it is now on the Democrat side, that it could be that on the Republican side as well?
I'm not afraid of that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they will make headway. They will make significant headway, but they will not create a conservative monoculture in the civil service. The headwinds against that from education polarization, from the sheer size of the civil service, and from selection into government, because like libs want to go work in government and conservatives want to go work in business. Those are all too strong to totally fight against. I think they will bring ideological balance. That is not what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about, we're going to be ruled by ideological righties and they're going to do all their righty things. And we're all going to be forced to convert to Christian nationalism. And no, that's not going to happen. And all the trans people will be forced to get sex change reversal operations. No, that's not going to happen. But I worry about other stuff. So is it possible that the government will become more efficient? I don't know, because I don't know what efficiency means. Is it possible some, low quality employees will just get the sack? Yes. Would that be good? Yes. Is it possible that high quality employees will get the sack because Elon thinks they're a bunch of wokies? Yes, that's also possible. Degrading our state capacity. So I do worry about programs being cut that will degrade our state capacity. So for example, USAID, they really hate USAID. And they're trying to kill it. They'll bring it back. The agency won't die because Congress has said it will exist. But many of its functions will get folded into the State Department, as happened in Canada and Australia, which did this before us, by the way. Canada and Australia killed their USAID equivalents and folded them into their State Departments. But anyway, but USAID is funding anti-China ideological stuff around the world. If that goes away, then that reduces our ability to oppose China ideologically around the world. And I do worry about foreign influence. I worry that Elon's businesses and Tesla make him not worry about that, And so I worry about foreign, I'm not talking about when I talk about foreign influence, I'm not talking about Russian spies are puppeteering the MAGA movement and, like people said in 2016, 17. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, because I don't think that's true at all, actually. I think China having influence over American businesses just through the same channels that we see them bully the NBA, that's real, and we know that's real. And I don't have to, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's out in the open.
So you're worried we'll throw out the baby with the bathwater, basically.
Yes. I'm worried we'll throw out the baby with the bathwater. So I'm worried that we'll throw out a lot of valuable scientific research that helps keep America at the forefront of science. I'm worried that we'll just cut a lot of health programs. So at some point, someone is going to tell these Doge guys that all those health programs we do in Africa are things that reduce African fertility rates and reduce future refugee and migrant waves to America, which I think they really don't want. If there's one thing I think that the Doge people would not want, it's a billion Africans clamoring at our southern border, because they went through Mexico and the Mexican government was unable to stop them, or whatever the hell, right? Boats, planes, whatever. They do not want a billion extra poor African people trying to get into America, the promised land. They don't want that. Or Europe is where they'll go first, actually. The boat people, massive boats and boats and boats of people. So at some point, they're going to realize that women's education and infant health are the two things that lower fertility rates. And if you lower fertility rates in Africa, you get fewer of those boat people to Europe. You get fewer of those migrants at our southern border. Someone is going to tell them. I would tell them, except they don't watch this podcast. Maybe next time you're at a party, you could tell them, because they haven't realized that.
Yeah, no, that's a strong right-wing argument for foreign aid, or some of this, very particular kind of foreign aid. That makes sense. With that, I want to be mindful of time, but yeah, this has been a great discussion on Doge and the budget. We didn't get to your great Ukraine piece, but maybe we'll get to foreign policy next time. As always, Noah, this great discussion. Until next time.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and erictornberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.